Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Guns and Guitars, and if you landed here, it's probably because you caught my video last week about how I made this acoustic guitar out of 15 layers of plywood cut entirely on a CNC laser machine. And so we're going to answer the question today, how does the guitar sound? So, if you want to see if you can make a decent sounding guitar using only a CNC laser, stick around. I'm Dan, this is Guns and Guitars, let's get started. So firstly, before I demo this thing acoustically, I want to tell you that I do have two piezo pickups installed in this thing. I have an under saddle bridge piezo, as well as a 3 transducer disc piezo installed as well. And of course the bridge piezo just installed underneath the bridge saddles. And then my 3 discs, I placed one on the bass side, one on the treble side, and one directly underneath the bridge. And both those piezos give entirely different sounds, as well as just the way the guitar sounds acoustically. Again, entirely different. Now, I learned a lot of lessons as I built this guitar that I'm going to learn from, and probably will take another stab at this down the road because I'm going to level with you. Acoustically, this guitar does not sound very good. And I'll explain why I think it doesn't sound good a little bit later, but let's go ahead and listen to some sound demos. Basically, I am recording both piezos at the same time. So we've got my 3-disc transducer coming out of the end pin for the strap button, and then I've got my under saddle piezo right here. We're going to record those simultaneously, and you probably noticed my camera mic is in the shot this week, and that's because in addition to picking up the sound of my voice, I want it to pick up the acoustic sound of this guitar. So I'll actually reposition this so it picks up the guitar really well. And then I'm just going to kind of flip through those settings as I kind of just noodle around on this guitar so you guys get a feel for what they sound like. Okay, so we'll just start with so that's pretty much what most people play when they first pick up an acoustic guitar, right? Just kind of strum on a G, C, and D chord. But let's do something else. All right, so gonna go ahead and address the elephant in the room. This guitar sounds terrible. Let's be honest. Acoustically, awful, right? I mean, it's a little bit louder than a semi-hollow electric guitar, right? But it doesn't really project a whole lot. It's got pretty much 0 low end, a little bit of low mids, but mostly the mids are really scooped, and then tons of highs, very bright sounding. And so the 3 transducer pickup, because it relies on the vibration of the instrument to generate the sound, it pretty much just sounds like an amplified version of what this guitar sounds like acoustically. And so, which is not great. You know, it's got that same sort of scooped mid sound and really bright high end. I actually had to do some pretty harsh EQing on it to kind of bring down some of those highs. They're a little bit ear piercing. Now the undersaddle piezo actually sounds half decent. The reason why it sounds better is because it doesn't rely on the vibration of the instrument to generate the sound. Pretty much it's just getting direct vibration from the strings, just, transmitted through that little bone bridge piece. And so that's why that sounds pretty good. So why does this guitar sound terrible? Well, as many of you guessed, one, it's made out of plywood. Lots of you guys commented that plywood is not a tone wood. It's not going to resonate. It's not going to sound good. And I am right there with you. I totally understand that. The reason why I chose plywood for this is, one, it looks really cool. And so you can see like the laminates in the scalp for that lower horn, as well as the arm carve, and just how cool it looks around the edges. I really like the look of the plywood. So that was one of the reasons. Also, I know that 5mm Luan cuts really well on the laser, and this is really just a prototype or a proof of concept, you might call it, to see if something like this is even viable. And I didn't want to waste money on really expensive tone woods to make a really good sounding guitar if the whole thing was just not going to work in general. And so this proof of concept kind of shows me that it is possible, but I need to implement some things that I learned. So one, obviously, is that we need to use some actual tone wood, especially for the top and for the back. We need some woods that are actually going to vibrate, and we need to make sure we plane them down to the proper thickness. 5mm, a bit thick for an acoustic guitar top. So two, this thing is way overbuilt. So I left the sides really thick on purpose because I didn't know what it was going to be like gluing all these pieces together, if they were going to perfectly line up, or if they were going to end up sort of like Jenga, like scattered, right? And so I thought I was actually going to be taking off a bit of material around the edge to get all the pieces nice and smooth. And I learned in the process that using my toothpicks as locators and just stacking them and gluing them like that, they actually all lined up really good and really close together. And so I didn't have to take off near as much material around the sides as I thought, which left the walls a bit thicker than I originally expected. And so that certainly translates to a more dead sound. And the bracing, I went way overboard because, again, this is my first time building an acoustic guitar, and I just don't really know how much bracing you need. And so I explained in my laser video how I did 3 layers of back bracing and 3 layers of front bracing. And that was just way overkill. Probably would have been fine with just 1 layer and maybe even less than that, honestly. And so just because my top and back are so thick, they probably didn't need braced at all. And so I probably would have ended up with a better sounding instrument had I done that. What I learned going forward and what I want to try in the future, I definitely want to take another stab at this, is one, I want to build it with some tone wood. So I might invest in some quality sheets that I can use for the top and the back, as well as figure out a different material maybe to use for the sides. And honestly, plywood might be good for the sides. Again, it's going to take some experimenting. But then when it comes to the cross bracing, I think rather than integrating the cross bracing into the perimeter pieces, I think I'll actually probably cut them out separately. That way they don't extend all the way to the edges of the instrument. And from what I understand, the way that you shape those cross brace pieces helps to shape the tone of the instrument. So I kind of want to put a little more thought into the shape of the cross bracing and then glue that all on separately as opposed to integrating it into the sides. Now, that being said, there are some things that are really cool about this instrument. One, it sustains a heck of a lot better than a typical acoustic guitar, and that's because there's no resonance. Essentially what I built here is an Acoustasonic because it is completely dead and just, too thick to really project any real sound, and you're really just relying on the piezo for it to sound half decent like an acoustic guitar. So I probably could just install like a little Strat pickup or something here and just make this an acoustic looking Acoustasonic, and it would totally be usable. It's extremely comfortable to play. The fact that I used, basically an electric guitar neck on it, and I did end up contouring the back to match the contour of the body. And so that combined with my scallop, you can get way up into those tiny frets really comfortably. And then the arm carve, I thought I went a little bit overboard on, but it turns out that is actually just perfect, and it's very comfortable. I mean, when you're playing this, you feel like you're playing an electric guitar. You don't feel like you're playing an acoustic guitar, which may be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. But it's very comfortable, and plugged in, it sounds decent. Anyway, pretty interesting proof of concept. I'm somewhat happy with it. Obviously not happy with the sound, but I think the design is super cool, and I think the idea has merit. So definitely stick around, stay subscribed if you want to see me take another stab at this. And, I can use my bigger laser and maybe even integrate the neck into it as well, which might be kind of cool. So I'm Dan, this is Guns and Guitars, and I'll see you in that next try.